Well, welcome back. You are reviewing for Test 3 in Bio 212 at Norwalk Community College. And we are picking up now with the respiratory system. Again, the material we cover in these reviews is material that I have seen students have difficulty with over the few years I've been teaching this class. What I want to make sure you're paying attention to is I'm not trying to give you the answers to questions. I'm trying to make sure you have foundational knowledge you can use to think through questions during an exam. Okay, so what are the components of a respiratory system? Both pulmonary and systemic. What we're talking about here, of course, is from your nose to the last alveoli. What actually makes those structures function, if that makes any sense, right? From your nose to the alveoli. And when we talk about systemic, what we're actually talking about here is, of course, internal respiration. How does it actually get to the cells so cellular respiration can occur in the actual mitochondria? Okay, so what, of course, I would do here, let's see if we can create some space here. Let's just go return. Of course, pick up the pen, go like this. And here's a simple cartoon of your nose. That is your nose. Okay, and it's your head. And you kind of look like a duck. Right, we're going to have you some arms over here. Arm, kind of weird ass looking arm. I apologize for that, but not really. Okay, and here's your other arm over here. Think like that, right? And of course, what we're talking about is gases passing back through the trachea, through the pharynx, trachea, then into the lungs, where it's going to bifurcate into both sides, right? Yay. And what I want, of course, you to realize is that this is a sealed chamber. That sealed chamber is important for the next two bullet points. So you know what's going to happen here. A couple things I want to make sure you pay attention to, of course, is, let's go with some different color here. I don't know. Outside here, we actually have a very high concentration of O2, right? We have a very low concentration of CO2. Not so bad for my left hand. Anyway, the way it's going to work, of course, all of the cells inside your body are undergoing metabolism so that you make CO2. So CO2 is going to actually want to exit the body, and that is our fundamental driving force for everything that we do to keep ourselves alive. We don't let that CO2 out of our body. We know what's going to happen, all right? So remember, C6, H12, O6, plus oxygen. That's why we're inhaling the oxygen. Travel to our cells somehow, mechanism unknown just yet, such that we end up getting CO2 plus H2O plus, at the end, hopefully, inside of the mitochondria, we have now process to make ATP. And of course, what we're going to do, we spend most of the rest of the chapter understanding why carbon dioxide and water in the presence of carbonic anhydrase, Ca, going to ensure that we end up getting H2CO3. It seems like every time we're just about to get started, bloody furnace goes on. Okay, pause. Okay, and what of course I need to make sure you remember as well is that this will then spontaneously dissociate into hydrogen protons, as well as the buffer bicarb. Okay, so this is what's governing what's going on. Everything from external or pulmonary, circulatory, meaning respiratory functions, to what's actually going to happen inside the plasma of your blood. And I guess I want to take this one step further. Not only do I want you to think about why we're pushing gas out of the body and we're getting oxygen to the mitochondria of the cells, last thing I want you to think about, of course, is that most of the atmosphere that you're inhaling and exhaling is an inert gas, all right? Why would Mother Nature do that? And not just for conversation's sake, this isn't a philosophical question, is that you actually have to regulate the percentage of oxygen and the percentage of carbon dioxide inside of the body, because as we've made this ATP, we have much more carbon dioxide inside of the body, and we have much less oxygen, and the space filler here, the nitrogen gas, ensures that there isn't enough of a disequilibrium to create problems for you. So because of those considerations, what we can do is we can now take a look at it. When people have looked at what's driving these reactions, we know that there's going to be a pressure change and there's going to be solubility considerations inside the bloodstream. Okay? And those are significant because, let me change colors here, obviously. Let's go to red. Let's draw a circulatory capillary bed for you here where blood is moving in an oxygenated manner such that you can then collect what you need out of it. And remember, this would be sort of obviously internal circulation or internal respiration, right? Because now we're thinking about the mitochondria inside the cells, but those gases will move down their concentration gradient, okay, into the spaces where the mitochondria will be. So how does this happen inside the lungs? Well, if we create a system where you seal these by using the muscles that make up the diaphragm that are innervated by the phrenic nerve, maybe I'm freaking left-handed. Phrenic nerve, right? We're going to regulate the inhalations and the exhalations. And as the concentrations of oxygen and carbon dioxide change inside your circulatory system, we're going to detect them. Think of what I'm doing here. I'm pointing out the fact that we actually will use the aortic arches and the carotid bodies, which means we're going to use both the vagus and the glossopharyngeal nerves to send information to the brain, medulla, to interpret, and pons to figure out what's going on. So I'm tying together multiple pieces here in a sort of simplistic cartoon so that you understand if we're allowing oxygen to move out here and we're collecting carbon dioxide here, how is that going to change everything inside the blood? Well, the first is inside here. We're going to have Boyle's law. Boyle's law. And then because all of these have to be soluble inside the plasma of blood, then we're thinking about how it is we change the solubility. Solubility. And primarily, this is what you need to remember, carbon dioxide is much more soluble inside the plasma of your blood than oxygen is. Okay, so Mother Nature takes advantage of this. And this allows us to actually now, as we are exhaling, remove carbon dioxide from the plasma of our blood. So how do the lungs do this in the context of those laws? Well, what we want to do is we want to think what an alveolus, whoops, let's get out of this for a second here. What is an alveolus? I got rid of all that cartoon so I can draw something new for you down here, right? Let's go back to this. Change colors. This is our terminal bronchiole that's actually going to an alveolus. Yay, alveolus, right? And outside the alveolus is going to be a capillary bed. Yay, you guys actually saw these in the lab this past Friday, right? Where you actually could see red blood cells inside of spaces. And of course, next to that is going to be this here, the capillary bed. So we're imagining both parts are there. But the reality is, of course, now on the inhalation, let's go to here, inhalation, oxygen moves in. I'm going to put that like that, O2. Okay, and on the exhalation, obviously, I'll push it before I change colors. Let's make sure we put an arrow on that. Let's change colors, blue. We're going to have carbon dioxide moves out. Okay, so this actually gets back to the second point, CO2. How does this happen? And what is the function of Bohr's law? So, getting ahead of ourselves here, but using it as review, let's go back to a red blood cell. And remember that red blood cells are inside these structures here, and they have just a few moments to collect oxygen onto hemoglobin. So let's put the HB inside here. HB, right? And we actually have to now regulate which way things are going to move. Oxygen is going to move in this way. Let's quickly change colors. I think I'm going to do everything with my left hand from now on. Anyway, carbon dioxide is going to move out, and this actually has to happen in a regulated manner. And my nudge, nudge, hint, hint, wink, wink for you guys, like I've said inside class, is make sure you understand which way carbon dioxide is moving with chloride. Okay? Did you understand what I'm saying? Okay. So what's going to happen, though, is that how does that become a physical law? Well, the physical law here is Bohr's law, where we have 4 binding sites for oxygen. I probably shouldn't put them in purple here, in blue, but now I'm going to go over here and I'm going to go turn it to red, and I'm going to say that this O, that O, that O, and that O change their ability to bind a hemoglobin relative to the pH. And the more alkaline, the more strongly it binds to hemoglobin. The more acidic, the more readily oxygen will leave hemoglobin to now transfer out into the tissues. That's what you need to understand, and that's why it's a physical law, because it's a pH shift that changes the shape of a protein, and that shape of a protein change now allows me to make oxygen available. Okay? Cool. I hope all this makes sense. Okay, so let's get out of this. Boom. Let's do this. What are the air volumes that are moving around the lungs and stored in how much, and what's the nitty-gritty details of the Bohr effect? Well, we have, I'm going to draw this for you like this. You're just sitting there right now. You're probably barely awake, not even paying attention to what I'm saying. Right? And you're like, I hate this class. I hate this person. I hate this class. I hate this person. And this is about 500 mils of gas, and maybe you got up and you're running for your Pop-Tarts on the other side of the room. And that's what you're supposed to see. It's called tidal volume. But the reality is if I made you run for your life, you have much more of that. And you have much more of this down here, which means I can get a lot more gas into your lungs. And remember your dissection, you can push that liquid out of each of the alveoli. All of that space can be occupied, and it is relaxed by sympathetic activation. Increased gas consumption requires sympathetic innervation. Same thing with getting gases out of your body. That's what I'm talking about with nitty-gritty details. So while you're running for your life, the dilation of alveoli can occur. Dilation of bronchioles can occur. Okay? Now, that's all happening. Let's draw this here. Excuse me, sorry about that. And inside here, we'll put a long cardiac notch there. Yay. And remember, you actually have lobes. And remember, you actually removed the actual pieces of these, right? You could separate them from one another. And inside there is the heart, and your thymus is there. And as you're inhaling, gases come in, they travel through branches to increase the surface area. So all the way up to your collarbones up here, which we call our scapula or our clavicles. They are our clavicles, right? You're going to increase with as much efficiency as possible the movement in all of these spaces, because now the visceral lining is attached to the parietal lining via fluid that's surrounding this space, right? So I should probably change color, but you get the idea, I hope. Okay? So by nitty-gritty details, first, before we get to the Bohr effect, we can pull in more gas. So let's pull in some more red. More red comes in, travels to where it's supposed to be, because now we have allowed for everything to expand. And what we've done is we've dropped the pressure inside the space 2 millimeters. 2 millimeters. That's supposed to be 2 m's, right? Okay. So what's actually happened here is now we actually have the ability for a red blood cell, this is a red blood cell, to bind more oxygen, because now its saturation coefficient is now allowing it to move more readily inside here. And then you can see the hydrogen proton inside of the red blood cell makes hemoglobin available because it leaves hemoglobin. Okay, so now hemoglobin can bind HB. HB can bind O2. And now we call this oxyhemoglobin. Okay? So just to remind you, what I've done is I've gone through a really relaxed manner here. Tidal volume, total volume that can actually be brought into the lungs in terms of an inhalation, and total volume that can be put out of the lungs in terms of an exhalation. Remember, everything that's left over at the end of the day when you're dying, that's the stuff that wheezes out of your body at the end. Think about the lungs you saw in the dissection, and how when you pushed on them you could push everything out. And imagine at death what happens there. So let's get rid of this. Before the furnace comes on again, let's move on to the next one. Once exchanged, what type, who binds to what gas to make what compounds? And what partial pressure of what gases drive reactions for gas exchange? I've already referred to this, right? So it's the partial pressure of carbon dioxide, who's more soluble, that actually allows for carbon dioxide to go into solution. But we make 3 populations of carbon dioxide. We make essentially pure carbon dioxide. Whoa, let's change the color here so you don't get confused. Blue. Carbon dioxide can go as a gas into the plasma of your blood. And you can also have carbon dioxide, oops, O2, so much for getting in front of myself here, is using my left hand, plus HB. Something's different, which is carbaminohemoglobin, okay? And then, of course, what we do is we make bicarb. This is the next population of carbon dioxide that you can never forget about because, you know, maybe you're going to go into respiratory therapy, and this is what's going to keep your butt alive. Not to mention chapter 26 and 27. Okay, so this is the carbon, this is the material we need to get out of the body. Sure, we got oxygen in, yay, but this is the waste product, and if we let this waste product stay inside of our body, we will die. Okay, and here are the products. And remember, what was this? Oh, nudge, nudge, hint, hint, wink, wink. What are the percentages of each? Okay. Now, when I'm talking about the lower part here, what is the mechanism of respiration? This is a general question, but think about what happens in the capillary bed as the environments change. Of course, I'm talking here about pH shift. S-H-I-F-T, and pH shift comes about as a result of carbon dioxide presence, CO2. So think about earlier conversation there. The next thing that's going to happen, though, of course, is that as you're doing work, temperature increases. I'm just going to put an arrow here, and I'm going to put temperature. T. EMP. MP. Okay, fantastic. Once you get that, you get the general idea. This is what makes oxygen available so that carbon dioxide can be bound by hemoglobin or converted into bicarb or become saturated as carbon dioxide inside the plasma of your blood. However, I'm also asking you a different thing. Let's change colors here quickly. We're already at 17 minutes. This is going longer than I thought it was going to. Here is your brain. This is your brain on respiration. Right? There's your pons, there's your medulla. That's that. This is my brain, at least. It's sort of infinitesimally small compared to yours, right? And remember, inside the pons and inside the medulla, we actually have these respiratory centers. Okay, you want to make sure you're studying what is the pons doing versus, say, what is the medulla doing? M-E-D, nudge, nudge, hint, hint, wink, wink. It is being innervated by sensory input from the carotid bodies and the medulla, meaning the aortic arch, so that we can detect how much carbon dioxide, how many hydrogen protons, and how much oxygen is there. And because you've done that, you can now change the respiratory rate to either increase the amount of gas that's taken out of the body or decrease the amount of gas that's taken out of the body. And that's all dependent upon what's happening at the capillary bed in any part of the body, because all of that blood eventually passes by those sets of chemoreceptors. Dun, 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 dun. This is a pretty good place to stop. If you have questions, don't be afraid to email them to me, okay? Or just stop by my office and ask. Remember, I'm in H114.